What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. I mentioned potentially doing this video a few videos ago, and a lot of people said just to do it, right? So the question is Bruno Fernandes essential? Now, as always, we're talking about our Game Week 1 squads. I don't like this idea that players are essential for the whole season because things change quickly in FPL, but we're talking about the first kind of 5 to 6 game weeks. So if you do enjoy the video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, comparing into other players, fixtures, some talking points and stuff like that, let's just have a look at how good he was last year. So he's currently 12 million, which is fair. I think he could have been perhaps a little bit lower, but I haven't seen many people argue about 12 million given how many points he scored last year. He's currently 40% owned, so there are a few players in FPL that are a little bit more expensive, or sorry, a little bit higher owned than he is, but obviously 40% is still quite high. I still view that though as 6 out of 10 managers don't have him, and I'm pretty happy with that, right? So of course it's not a differential, and when you add in captaincy and stuff it gets even worse, but I don't know, I still feel like 40% is not that highly owned for a player of his caliber. 18 goals, 14 assists last year was pretty decent, right? 32 returns in what would have been a max 38 games, right? And I don't think he even started all. I think there was maybe 2 games where he didn't play, maybe 3, but 32 returns was crazy. Now, 18 goals, 9 of those goals were penalties, right? I know a lot of people call him Fernandes, all this rubbish, but he does, for FPL, we don't care, right? He's on penalties, that's a good thing. We like players that take penalties. Got 9 last year. Man United have averaged 10 penalties a season over the last 4 seasons. Now, one of those seasons was only like 3 or 4 penalties, so that just shows you how high the last 3 have been. But Man United do get a lot of penalties, and 6.6 points per match was pretty crazy, and a good fixture run to start, right? There's not too many fixtures there that I'd be too concerned about. Let's see how Leeds start, I suppose. And obviously West Ham away will be fairly difficult, but Villa, Newcastle, Wolves, Southampton, Leeds in general, first 6 fixtures are looking pretty good. So he's looking decent, but I've started to see people do Bruno drafts, as in no Bruno in my drafts. Is there better ways to spend the money on Son, Sancho, and spread it around a little bit? We're going to talk about that in this video, but before we do that, let's talk about Fantracks. Very happy to say that I've partnered with Fantracks. If you've not seen it before, it's draft style football with the Premier League, right? So one of the key things I always see with FPL is this player's template, everybody owns them. You don't get that in draft. One person owns one player, and that means no one else can have them. And the great thing about this is it's fully customizable as well. There are so many options, which I'm going to take you through a few in just a second, but that means scoring and everything like that. So you know how in FPL, central defensive midfielders and players like that, they're just not worth anything because they never score, they never assist, but they do tackle, they do intercept, and you can change the point scoring in this to make those players better if you want. Just before I jump into the website, for anyone that signs up, which is completely free to do, by the way, you can set up draft leagues for no money at all. There is a link in the description below, and once you do that, you'll be automatically entered for basically a Premier League shirt of your choice, right? So make sure you get signed up, link in the description below. This is the website, so I've gone straight into the league setup rather than showing you everything before. Obviously, you can do that yourself once you're signed up. So this is the Let's Talk FPL League. So a couple of the cool things that I saw is this is the player pool. So, for example, if you think it's too easy when you can pick the likes of Kane, Fernandes, Salah, etc., you could get rid of the top 6 clubs and just do it with the rest of the league if you want to make it a little bit more difficult. Obviously, that's completely up to you. The other thing that's really cool is the scoring system. So, obviously, you don't have to go through and set this all up. There are default numbers in there, but if you want to make something worth more or worth less, you can do that as well. So, goals, for example, are worth 10 points. You might say that's a little bit too much. I want it more like FPL, so I'll go for 6 points, but you might make something else higher. So interceptions, look, I really want to make sure that defensive midfielders or whatever get more points. You could put that up to 2. Own goals could be -3 instead of -5. You get the point, right? There's loads of things you can customize in here. So make sure you give it a go. Link in the description below. You can sign up for free. There will be a chance to maybe join the draft with me, so keep an eye out for that over pre-season. But yeah, link in the description below. Get signed up. Start your draft nights. Get your friends involved. Create some leagues. And just for signing up, you'll be entered into a draw for a Premier League shirt. What is there to lose? Okay, so let's compare Bruno Fernandes to some other players that are around the same price. Not exactly the same, but potentially over players we might buy or we might be considering buying for our Game Week 1 squads. But also, obviously, we have to check the fixtures as well. So I've got those as well drawn up for kind of the big 6 teams. I mean, obviously, you could include Aubameyang in there as well if you wanted to. But essentially, I'm going to run you through what I would be thinking about if I was considering dropping Bruno or maybe even putting him in my team if he wasn't already. So for this, we're mostly going to be looking at captaincy opportunities because ultimately, a player at kind of 12.5 million, the value they provide is through captaincy, right? Most of the value players are going to be a bit cheaper because they're underpriced. These players are priced at the top because they get the most points, and therefore captaincy is a big key consideration. But let's quickly just look at the stats so far. So I've put Kevin De Bruyne on there because he absolutely ripped it up. These are expected goal involvement per 90 minutes for last season, right? Obviously, if you want to go back and check previous seasons, you can, but these players tend to do the business over many seasons, right? So Kevin De Bruyne was 0.79. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, as always, stats aren't everything. The Kevin De Bruyne went through a very kind of rough patch, I would say, of finishing where he got loads of good chances, loads of kind of one-on-ones with the keeper, and he just didn't slot it away. Eventually he did, and everyone kind of changed their tune on him. But these things happen, right? Sometimes you go through those run of spells where you get, as a penalty taker, you get no penalties, you get loads of penalties, whatever it might be. But De Bruyne was brilliant last year, and as we know from Man City, he's pretty much about as nailed on as you're going to get for an attacker, right? He plays most games when he's available. Kane also had a ridiculous season, 0.73. Obviously, one of the things we're discussing today is Game Week 1 squads, right? We're not worried about who to buy in Game Week 10, etc. just yet. And with Kane, is he going to be available for the start of the season? Is he going to switch to Man City? These are all key considerations. And if that transfer is going to go ahead, the likelihood, I suppose, of him playing, and James said this on Planet FPL when I had him on, the chances of Kane playing against Man City in Game Week 1 is pretty low. So then the question is, if you really want him, do you leave money in the bank? Do you put him on the bench? Do you just go with other premiums for now and maybe get him in later on a wild card? There's some players that are going to cause us these kind of headaches and other players that won't. If De Bruyne is fit, he starts the season once he's back from the Euros, etc. With Kane, there's slight concerns over his fitness and availability. Mane, brilliant, 0.67. He's a top player. Yet last year, he was a bit similar to De Bruyne in some ways, that he just wasn't finishing those chances that you would expect him to do. If he has a season like we know he can, he will be worth 12 million. The problem is, Salah's just below him and he's on penalties. So, of course, you're going to go for Salah instead. So, the key question then becomes, do you go Salah and Mane, Salah and Kane, Salah and De Bruyne, Salah and Fernandes, right? I think most people are kind of locked into having Salah in their team. There'll obviously be some people that don't, but I think Salah's going to be in most of it. Fernandes, right down, 0.55. Now, this expected goal involvement per 90 is without penalties. Now, the reason I usually take penalties out is because you can't really predict when that's going to happen, right? I can tell you that all these players are going to have a good season. If they play the same minutes, De Bruyne might come out just on top with then Kane behind. It probably won't work out quite like that. But with penalties, you just don't know. But with Man United having 10 average per season over the last 4, you can probably say that Man United are going to get quite a few. Fernandes is a very good penalty taker as well. So he's going to top up those stats with penalties too. And then you've got Son as well, just behind on 0.53. One thing worth pointing out is obviously goals are worth more than assists. So when you look at these numbers, Fernandes and De Bruyne, their numbers are more made up from expected assists rather than expected goals. Now with De Bruyne, his numbers are so high it doesn't really matter. But with Kane, Mane, Salah and Son, they're more likely to score you a goal, especially from open play, than someone like Bruno Fernandes. But as you'll see later on, we're going to talk through why that might increase this season for Bruno Fernandes. So his numbers are fairly low, but when you look at the fixtures, they are probably some of the best Man United's fixtures. So again, you're looking at Liverpool at the top. You definitely want Salah, I would say. I like I said the other day, okay, you don't want to call him essential, but he's really, 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 really good, right? Really good option. So then it comes down to who is your second one, because I think fitting three of these premium players, especially the ones that are 12 million plus, is going to be pretty difficult. So having Salah, Fernandes and Kane, it's possible, but it's hard to do. Same with Kane, De Bruyne, Fernandes, whatever combination you want it to be. So I'm looking at this straight away, and I'm thinking, right, I will probably captain Salah for Norwich, Burnley, and Crystal Palace, definitely, right? So for 3 of the first 5 game weeks, and this is how I'm working out which other premium to get. 3 of the first 5 game weeks, I'm captaining Salah. My issue is game week 3, he plays Chelsea. And game week 4, okay, he plays Leeds. Is there a better option there? So in game week 3, the two players that kind of stand out for me are Man United, so Bruno Fernandes, or Spurs, which would be Kane or Son. I would probably discount Leicester. I'm just not going to buy Vardy. And in game week 4, they play Man City, and they've also got West Ham, Brighton as well. It's not the most easy run, right? And with Chelsea, I suppose they don't really have a big hitter either, but they also play Liverpool in game week 3, so I'm writing them off. And with Man City, it's Arsenal, Leicester. So again, we know Man City can score loads of goals in any given game, but I think the fixtures would probably put me off captaincy a little bit, right? Arsenal and Leicester. So I'm looking between Man United and Spurs. Now, Newcastle at home, I would say, and Crystal Palace away are probably slightly better than Leeds away. And in game week 3, anything's probably better than Chelsea at home. So Watford at home, Wolves away. Now, I actually think if you're looking at it like that, you could make a case for Kane. But is he going to be fit and available? And if you go for Son instead as captain, which I do think is viable, is he going to be the main man? What will they be like without Kane if he's not playing there, or if he's not fit, or if he's moved to Man City? So that's a concern. But I do think, based on captaincy alone, you can make a case to go without Bruno Fernandes, because you could go for Son or you could go for Harry Kane if he was still at Spurs for game week 3 and 4. Watford at home, Crystal Palace away, slightly better than Wolves away, Newcastle at home. But is it that much better that the entire fixture run should be ignored? And I don't think so, right? Spurs start off with Man City, Wolves, and then they've got Chelsea to bookend that. So their first 5 fixtures are pretty difficult. Man United are just so good. Leeds at home, Southampton away, even Wolves away. Will Wolves be as defensively sound? I've said this a lot of times now as they were before. I'm not sure how much money I would bet on that, right? And then Newcastle at home is pretty decent. Obviously, West Ham away is better than Chelsea at home for Spurs. So I'm looking at that set of fixtures, and I definitely think that Man United is better than Spurs. And therefore, am I okay to go for Wolves away and Newcastle at home over Watford at home and Palace away? I possibly am. So I don't think... I mean, to answer the question of the video, is Bruno Fernandes essential? I would say probably not. I don't think any player is definitely essential. But there's probably no harm or no good reason to start without him if he's available and fit. I don't know if he's back for pre-season training yet, but obviously Portugal got knocked out a little bit earlier than England, etc., and Italy. So he should be back training with the team and the squad a lot sooner than the likes of Sancho, Rashford, and whoever it might be, right? Maguire, etc. Okay, so that's something to take into account. But looking at those fixtures, I'd find it hard not to just go for Fernandes from the start, especially if this whole Kane transfer business is still going on, etc. And although his numbers are not the best, they're still good, right? And there's obviously a chance for that to increase this season as well. Plus, he's still on penalty. So let's talk about the talking points. Okay, so there's still some things to think about as we get into pre-season. We see what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does. Obviously, Man United have played a few games already, but they are missing a few of their kind of big names in that are still away training, on holiday or whatever it might be because of the Euros. I would say most of them will be back and available, so I'm not too concerned about that. Sancho's obviously there. Now, we don't know if he's going to be playing from game week 1. I don't think it's going to take too long for him to get into the team and start playing. Sancho may take the creative burden off of Fernandes, right? I think to a certain extent, Man United have been a little bit one-dimensional. You get the ball to Fernandes, you hope that he creates something. Obviously, when Pogba was in the team at the same time, there was a little bit of that kind of burden lifted to a certain extent. And obviously, Shaw provides creativity down the left. But apart from that, Man United don't really have a whole host of players that are going to create chances, like a right back, etc., that's going to bomb forward. Like Wan-Bissaka is just not that creative outlet. With Sancho, you're adding another player in the mix. So if it's Sancho, Shaw, Pogba, Fernandes all on the pitch, it kind of takes a little bit of a burden off Fernandes. Now, possibly that might mean that his assist potential comes down a little bit, but hopefully what it could mean is that he gets into the box a little bit more. So although he only scored 9 open play goals last year, could he increase that and still have the backup of penalties as well? That's something that could happen. Sancho's very creative off that left or right hand side, and Fernandes arriving late into that box could be decent. Will Man United play a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1? Right now, they just do not, in my opinion, they don't have the players to play a 4-3-3 how they would want to play it, because ultimately, if Pogba doesn't go, where's he going to play? You can't really play Pogba and Fernandes in front of like McTominay or Fred or Matic. Like Matic just doesn't really have the legs anymore to play consistently. So I think they'll revert to a 4-2-3-1 just because of the personnel that they've got. Obviously, still trying to sign Varane. If they sign a midfielder that comes in and changes the game, then possibly. But I think 4-2-3-1 is still going to happen, which is probably good for Fernandes from an FPL perspective, because obviously he'll be playing in that number 10 position. So I think that's a good thing, but obviously keep an eye on that. Who's fit and available for Game Week 1? So I mentioned that quite a bit already. I think compared to like a lot of the teams here that we saw before, Fernandes is going to be ready. We know Salah and Mane are also going to be ready. They've been in pre-season training for a long time. There is probably an argument to go for Mane, by the way. I don't think I would completely write him off. But Man United's fixtures are also quite good if you want to spread around your players a little bit. Will De Bruyne be fit and available for the start of the season? Will Kane be fit and available? Will he be at Spurs, etc.? Son will be good. Right? I don't see an issue there. But that's something to consider. Who's available for Game Week 1? If Fernandes is ready, we know one of the big things with him is, which I didn't really mention before, is minutes. You know, every single week he's going to be in the starting lineup. Every single week he's going to play close to 90 minutes. And you do kind of get that with some of these players as well. So Salah, I would say, is the same, and Mane to a certain extent, although obviously Jota's there now as well. De Bruyne usually gets good minutes, so does Kane. So there's not too much of a worry there, but if that was a concern around Fernandes himself, you can just stop worrying about that. All right? We know he's going to play. My experience from last season, and the last point, no one is ever essential, but... Right, this is where I give you my opinion on whether or not I will probably be going with him. Obviously, we're still kind of 2.5 weeks out from the season, so things can change. I went and looked it up. So last year, Bruno Fernandes kind of hit the ground running. He got lots of penalties, especially in the first part of the season, from what I remember. And I didn't start with him, okay? I didn't buy him till game week 13. Now, if you watched my videos last season, you would have been people thought I had an agenda against Bruno Fernandes, which is absolutely mad. But that seems to happen whenever I don't buy a player. But I didn't buy him until game week 13, and I think I sold him around game week 27 or 28. And I only owned him for one more week of the season. That was when Man United had a triple game week, so they played 3 times in the space of a game week. And I got him back on the free hit, and I never had him again. So what's that? Game week 27 on was about 11-ish weeks I didn't own him, and then 12 weeks at the start of the season. So for 23 of 38 weeks last year, I didn't own Bruno Fernandes. And if I quickly just look up exactly how many points he got, it was 244, which was the highest scoring player last year. So for whatever I just said, what was it, like 23 weeks of a 38 game week season, I did not own the highest scoring player for the season. So straight away that tells me that nobody is essential. But, and this is where I had about, because I see people do this all the time. They look at a person that's doing, an FPL manager that's doing really well, and they'll go and look at who they've not owned, and then the argument will be, you see, no one's essential. But I finished 1200th last year. It was 1294. Could I have finished higher if I got Bruno Fernandes earlier? Possibly. And when I go back and look at the fixtures for this year, I just don't really see a reason why I wouldn't start with a guy that got 6.6 points per match, penalties, really good fixture run. We know he's probably going to start in game week 1 and continue to play 90 minutes week in, week out. Sancho should make them a stronger team. Yes, it might mean a few less assists for Fernandes. Obviously, remember he got 14 last year, but hopefully some more open play goals as well. And one thing I didn't really put on here, but I should have, you can transfer players in and out. So if you don't start with him, you can get him later on. And if you do start with him, it doesn't mean you've got to own Bruno Fernandes for the whole season. One thing I think we're going to have to do this year, especially if Kane moves and if Haaland moves to Chelsea, although I'm not sure how likely that is this season, we're going to have to move these big hitters around, and we're going to just have to kind of accept the fact you're not going to be able to own everyone. I can have Salah and Fernandes and be pretty happy. What if Kane goes and smashes it against Watford or Palace? That's just something I've got to decide ahead of time. And that is why I think looking at fixtures, again, just to quickly go back to it once more, I think this is really important, deciding in advance who you want and trying to not let what happens in games in between affect you too much. Because if Salah just suddenly, I don't know, Man City, if De Bruyne suddenly scores against Arsenal and Leicester, your first thought shouldn't be, you know what, De Bruyne, he's actually pretty good, he scores goals. It should be, I made a decision not to have him for those tougher fixtures, and I went for someone with easier fixtures instead. And I would definitely plan ahead when it gets to like game week 3-4, start thinking about game week 6 to 10, who are you going to need? And you might have to chop and change. And there will be times this season where we don't own Salah, we don't own Fernandes, etc., etc. So no one is essential, and I wouldn't say Fernandes is essential, but there's so many reasons to point to starting with him. I just can't really, right now at least, see a reason not to. Although for a lot of people's midfields, it comes down to something like Son and Sancho versus Fernandes and a 7 million midfielder or a 7.5 million midfielder. That is an interesting discussion point. And at that point, it comes down to how often you want to captain him. But I think Fernandes is right up there for captaincy, close to Salah for a lot of weeks. So I will probably be starting with him. There we go then. The question we're asking ourselves, is Bruno Fernandes essential for our Game Week 1 FPL squads? Of course. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm saying I probably will start with him. Most of the drafts I've put in have got him and Salah in it. And I just kind of build around it. But I don't think he's essential. It all comes down to captaincy for the most part for me. And I'm happy after last season to chop and change these players around. Obviously, he has got a price hike compared to what he started last year. But he's probably still worth it, I would say. But let me know in the comments below. Give it a like if you enjoy it. Hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers by Game Week 1. It is definitely possible. And if you haven't checked out Fantracks, link in the description below if you want to play a draft style fantasy football, fully customizable. It is really great if you want to set up a good night of drafting with your friends and obviously play throughout the season, or you can make it much smaller. Link in the description below. And lastly, shout out to everybody that signed up on Patreon. Loads of new recruits this week, so or after this last video, I should say. So Raw J, Addy M, Daniel R, Aman, Dan S, Andre C, and Jonathan A. Thank you very much for signing up. If you want to check it out and support me on Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. Got another good video out tomorrow and plenty more to come before the start of the season. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you again soon.